is a strange, I don't know what you call it exactly, anomaly, a light anomaly, a star anomaly. And apparently the closer you get to Jove space, the better you can see it.
It has been nicknamed Caroline's Star.
Whatever happened there is massive.
What caused that whole thing to happen?
Jovian stargates have gone offline.
The circadian sleepers have also been appearing.
All those things have been scanning everything that comes near them.
The unidentified structures that have been popping up and disappearing.
They are listening to you.
Preparing to explore, preparing for war.
Is it possible that the sleepers have found a way to break away from the construct?
There's no telling what they might do out of self-defense.
Maybe the sleepers are the ones needing the body parts so that they can reconstruct bodies, because their actual bodies have withered away.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashterothi, and this is Hydrostatic Presents Lore Panel. We welcome all of you back. I know a lot of you are very excited to see us return. We are very excited to be coming back to you, and we are very, very excited about what we have coming up in November. So, to celebrate all of that, or in anticipation of all of that, or in honor of all of that, we have decided to go back to the beginning. We have, so far as Hydrostatic Lore Panels, produced, I think, over 16 hours worth of content. However, a lot of that spans over the last couple of years. A lot of that information is obsolete. A lot of that information is speculation that either has been proven out or not proven out, as it were. And so this is to be a reset of sorts. We are going to be providing you, dear Empyreans, the best information that we can to get you up to speed with the lore, knowledgeable about what's going on, and prepared for what is to come in November and beyond. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce us to our panel, or rather, I'm going to allow the panel to introduce themselves. I'm going to go around the circle, starting with Elizabeth.
Hello, my name is Alizabeth, and I'm the Amor lore expert for this panel. I also kill drifters by the bushel, and I write for thematani.com, which is changing to imperium.news. So, hello.
Sorry about the mispronunciation of your name. Starting with a good foot. All right, Makoto.
Well, hi there. So I'm Makoto Priano, CEO of Itsukame Zainu, one of the coordinators for the Arataka Research Consortium, a group that runs public drifter hive fleets. If you're interested in checking out the hives and shooting some drifters, check out our in-game channel, Consortium Operations. We do weekly ops, and we'd be happy to have you.
Great. Mark726.
Hi everyone, I'm Mark726. I am the author of the EVE Travel blog, as well as the EVE Lore Survival Guide, and a general lore enthusiast.
Morwen Lagann.
Hi, I'm Morwen Lagann. I'm the CEO of Tyrathleon Interstellar, another one of the corporations affiliated with the Arataka Research Consortium. I'm another one of the coordinators, and my lore specialty is just kind of everything in general. I just like to keep track of everything. I, too, like many others here, eat drifters for breakfast, and love seeing them explode in pretty green lights. You can generally catch me if you have questions about how to do that. I'm very easy to find in-game. and on Twitter.
And finally, Uriel. Oh, we got so far without any problems. Uriel, you there? All right. Well, if he gets himself straightened out, then we will allow him to introduce himself later. In the meantime, as I said before, this is going to serve as a story so far kind of episode. We are entering into a new world with Eve Ascension. We have plenty of alpha clones coming to bolster our ranks, and there is a new NPE on the horizon that plays into a lot of this story stuff that we've been doing. So we are actually going to start out by talking about some of the principal players, and oh, it sounds to me like Uriel's got his comms figured out. So Uriel, can you introduce yourself? No. All right, we'll try again. Just go ahead and interrupt me whenever you need to. All right, so we are going to start with principal actors. We're going to start with kind of the most obvious one, the one that a lot of people will probably know at least some stuff about. We just had an event called the Purity of the Thrones event, which was really showcasing her new role within this story. Of course, I'm talking about the Empress Catiz Tashmerkon the First. I'm just going to hand it over to you, Liz. Go ahead and start talking about Catiz.
Okay, Catiz Tashmerkon. So her full title is Her Majesty Catiz I, Empress of Holy Amar, Defender of the Imperial Right, and Protector of... I have it written down somewhere, but there you go.
Protector of the Faith.
Protector of the Faith. There you go. So she, her team was victorious in the Amar secession trials, and has been coordinated as the Empress of Amar. Shathal Sen has been conducted, so everything is kosher for her moving forward. She has her own privy council now. I guess the main thing that people know about Catiz is the controversial bit about Catiz. So we'll just dive right into that. She's not Eudorian. There's no such thing as Eudorian anymore. The idea of a Eudorian bloodline has been deleted. They have intermingled with True Amar so much that there's really no such thing.
What are the Eudorians?
Well, okay.
Who are the Eudorians?
So there were a few different races that wound up on the same planet that we now call Amar Prime. There were the True Amar that lived on an island called Amar Island that was roughly the size of Taiwan, according to what I've heard from CCP. Then there was the Eudorian race bloodline that lived on a couple of continents, and then there was also the Canid, and there was like one more that I forget, but they are not actually important to the story. Eventually, no, Ialor were in a different place, Makoto. They were on a different planet. So the what happened is the Amar Empire, the True Amar, basically decided to conquer the whole planet, and so they did, and they took it all over. Sometimes with allying with some of the Canid tribes to do that, since the Canid tribes were known for being kind of barbaric and very warrior-like. And so they took over the Eudorians and took them as slaves. Eventually what happened is that the Eudorians were intermingled so much with the True Amar that there was really no difference. The catch comes from the Amar scriptures say that the True Amar are the ones that have been chosen to lead. So True Amar generally refers to people that were on Amar Island and their descendants at the beginning of the reclamation. Empress Catiz has some Eudorian blood in her background. We're not even sure. We're not sure if House Tashmerkon started off as a Eudorian house. It's very doubtful that it did. But somewhere in their history, they did intermingle with Eudorians, so she's not pure True Amar. This doesn't really matter for the Amar Empire, as very few True Amar are actually pure true Amar with no Eudorian blood.
I'm going to cut in here real quick to just briefly kind of mention, you mentioned this in our lore update. Really, all it is kind of a thinly veiled attack to the noble house nature of Tashmerkon itself. Most of the other noble houses are noble houses going long, long back. Tashmerkon actually are relatively recent as a member, which is why they would have mingled in, whereas the other ones stayed very, very sure to be pure.
Not entirely true. Tashmerkon's been a noble house for a long time, but they were just recently elevated to a royal status. So the elevation of House Tashmerkon was about 300 years prior to game time. King Canid II decided he didn't want to die, and so he kind of pulled a Thucker and left.
Calling him the second is a bit of a stretch, though.
Right. So he left and did his own thing, and so they had a kind of a civil war that wasn't really fought, but they needed a new royal house. Tashmerkon happened to be fantastically wealthy, and Emperor Hydarian VII, I might be mispronouncing that, basically, said, okay, you can be a royal house, and then there was some, contributions of their fund to the imperial coffers. So you have, I don't know what the Amar word for simony is, but I'm sure it was said. They're also a very mercantile house, and mercantilism is not really what true Amar nobility does. They have people that do that for them, right? They're the higher strata of Amar nobility are the people that just kind of manage things, but they don't actually get their hands dirty. Catiz Tashmerkon, on the other hand, has gotten her hands dirty. She's really gotten down into the nitty-gritty. She actually left her house and started her own mining corporation, made boatloads of money there, and then came back.
She's like one of the richest people in the cluster, if I'm not
She
mistaken.
is the richest single person in the cluster, hands down, according to lore. That's Catiz. So there's that. There's also the fact that this is the first Tashmerkon Empress. And they've only stood for 2 succession trials now. They stood in a succession trial after Emperor Hydarian VII died. There was no succession trial for when Empress Jamyl was crowned, and then this one. So there are a lot of royalty and other higher strata true Amar that kind of look at this as she bought her way into the emperorship. And that is something that is going to be a significant factor going forward for her.
Right. There was in fact a terrorist organization known as the Purity of the Thrones that were largely against her coronation, but it appears as if they've been violently and ruthlessly stamped out with the help of the Capsuleers.
The Purity of the Throne, the organization seemed to be one that were kind of looking for a uprising of some kind more than just themselves. Kind of this idea that if we do it, other people will follow us. They really needed a popular uprising against Catiz being coronated. They didn't get it. None of the other houses allied with them, so they didn't get any support at all. So that was really their end game. There was no way that the organization itself was going to be able to take on the Amar military, even its diminished state as it was.
I'm going to pause you right there and bounce it over to Makoto. You've been jonesing to say something.
So, slightly countervailing opinion. First thing to note, of course, is that per the legalities of the Amar Empire, Alizabeth is absolutely 100% right. One brief interjection, something that Delegate Zero said at this last FanFest is that he doesn't think that there have been any public-facing retcons that say retroactive continuity changes to the story, but at the same time, there are interesting things in slightly older lore that are less equivocal about Tashmerkon. In the game at this point, the Tashmerkon family description, for instance, reads, because they are of Eudorian ancestry, not true Amarians, blah, 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 blah. So, there's that bit there. And then even in 2008, that's a YC 110, there was some drama involving an Artichoper school chancellor who wanted the Eudorians to be cast back into servitude because they were still insufficiently pure.
And Artificer is another house of the or noble house for the Amar, right?
They're the hardline house for the Amar.
Yeah, extremely conservative. So by this, what I mean to say is that Elizabeth is absolutely right, but it's also still sort of this recent unsettled thing. So for, like, let's say someone is born, they're written in the Book of Names. If they had heavy Udorian ancestry, oh, thank you, they would be written in as true Amar, but it's still active in the public consciousness that there are these people who are in fact not really true Amar, or not as purely true Amar as might be.
Okay, so
well, I
putting
think
Sorry,
I was just going to say, I think it helps that both the Theology Council and the Order of St. Tentremon, which are also known as fairly hardline, pure to Scripture, an order very, very close to Scripture, came out so strongly in favor of a Tashmir-Khan emperorship, for lack of a better term. The fact that both of those came out so strongly, I think, somewhat helps to cement the legitimacy of a Tashmir-Khan reign in the people's minds.
Actually, so a couple points. In terms of who's Eudorian and who's true Amar and etc., the majority of the commoners in the Amar Empire are likely going to be mixed in terms of Eudorian heritage. The only people that are really going to care about that sort of purity going back to Amar Island are going to be your noble houses. So that's probably going to be a thing. As far as cementing her rule, the fact that Theology Council and Tentremon did was important, but it wasn't as significant as Shathal Sen. Shathal Sen has completely legitimized her rule. All the 5 people that had any hope of actually opposing her or any legitimacy to oppose her voluntarily committed suicide / murdered each other. So there is no opposition to her left. She is set, and that's pretty much the end of it.
Outsider's opinion, essentially, the Tashmir-Khan victory establishes the primacy of reclamation doctrine. If you even think that the Tashmir-Khan family is primarily Udorian in descent, or at least has a strong lineage enough that they're not necessarily true Amar, the fact that God chose her through the trials to ascend is a validation of the reclamation doctrine.
It's not so much God chose her through the trials, but she proved worth through the trials. It's a slightly different theology there. So she wasn't picked by God. She proved that she was worth it by her trials team winning.
Yeah, by her choices in who to have fly for her, she demonstrated she was fit to rule.
Exactly.
Likewise, Khan very, very, very much did not show that by picking a fucking heretic.
Exactly.
All right, so trials and emperorship kind of questions aside, where are the Amar at right now? What is going on with them? They obviously just had a new ruler changeover, and the Drifters are still a threat. So what is the Amar kind of doing as an empire right now?
Okay, so Empress Catiz gave a pretty good indication of what was going to be happening in her speech. Her speech covered a few different points. The first thing is the Amar Navy has been pretty badly mangled. They had the Drifter War, they had the Blooder Incursion. They have not. They were hurt pretty badly. I haven't gotten official numbers from CCP on how many Amar were killed in the Drifter War. CCP Affinity says unofficially she thinks it was in the millions. That the Amar did okay. That's
unofficially. The players, on the other hand, go, "You're full of shit,"
unofficially,
because there's no way that it was that low.
Yeah, unofficially, from the people that did Drifter incursions, the Amar got absolutely stumped. So Empress Catiz needs to rebuild the Imperial Navy, and to do that, she needs to really modernize and update the Amar economy. It's kind of going to be like, I'm hesitant to make this parallel, but if you look at Russia and the Soviet Union, they had a very large amount of land, they had a large amount of people, but they weren't really up to the modern standards. And so it's going to be trying to drag the Amar Empire into a improved economy, and that's really where her focus is going to be, because she is the merchant princess, and that is where she's going to think. She's also very liberal, and now liberal for Amar doesn't mean what it means for anyone else. Liberal for Amar means that you will stray further from the scriptures. Tashmar Khan is one of the few houses that will actively and openly use transcranial microcontrollers on their slaves, which basically is this mind control implant that's kind of like Sancha, but not as creepy, but still pretty creepy.
Go Ishikone.
And so we're likely to see that in terms of slave. It's not going to be as much we need to make slaves work hard because that will help reclaim them and make them better spiritually. It'll be we need to make slaves work hard because our gross domestic product requires it. And yeah.
Well, one of the interesting things from the coronation was that the Sanmatar of the Minmatar Republic actually came to the coronation. Do you really think that they're going to focus more on slavery?
That thing, it still blows my mind. So we know that the new player experience, they've announced that they're going to be focusing in on faction warfare. So having the Sanmatar show up at her coronation and the president of the Gallente Federation show up at her coronation and then be like, oh, but you're all still fighting this faction warfare, guys. It's super important, I promise. That kind of annoyed me from a storytelling point of view, right? Like Emperor Hirohito and Prime Minister Tojo didn't jet over to DC in 44 for Roosevelt's inauguration. Like it just didn't happen. I think
that's how proxy wars work, right? Because it's the
yeah, but it's not a proxy war. That's the whole thing. It's not a proxy war. There are actual Amar Navy ships in the war zone. There are Republic fleet ships in the war zone that are being fought. And if you go into a Plex, there is a Republic ship or an Imperial ship. So when people say, oh, it's a proxy war, not really. I mean, it's fought by Capsuleers, but there is an extensive Navy presence that is also there. So I would expect that I hope, dear God, I hope that the storyline with the Sanmatar being there will lead somehow to some more animosity between the two empires that will help explain why we are getting all of these new people in to come fight a war.
We do know that CCP Affinity, who is one of the main key people assembling this lore together with Delegate Zero and Falcon, has many times last year said that she is working towards a four-way war at some point with faction warfare. So we, of course, don't have any idea where we're at in that when it comes to like technical limitations or anything like that. But
so I know she said that, but if you really look at how Catiz works, I do not see... I mean, like, they will have to... The Amar Empire will not be the one to end their alliance with the Caldari state. It might happen some other way, but it's not going to be Catiz that does that. She's going to be focusing on trade deals. She's going to be focusing on improving the economies of everything. She's going to be, really working to strengthen that alliance rather than weaken it. So if they are going to four-way war, it's not going to be because of anything Catiz does.
We also have a question from the chat. I just want to clarify that the Sanmatar is the leader, the de facto leader of the Minmatar Republic. They have tribal leaders, but the Sanmatar is kind of the head of the tribal council.
A ceremonial head of state. On the Caldari side of it, I could see two elements where there would be room for a split. The first, of course, being the loans that the Amar Empire made to the Caldari state under Heth. If something went terribly wrong with that, then that could cause some major issues, and that would be something that would be on the Empress's radar. The other potential issue is that the Amar Empire and the Caldari state have notably different viewpoints with regard to the Jove, and likely also the society because of that. So that could be another point where a wedge could be driven on. And that would actually not really be something that either of them would necessarily start.
Well, so it sounds to me like the Amar have had taken some blows in the last few years, but they are largely kind of in a stabilization effort. There is a group of people who do not appear to be stabilized. They appear to be mostly gone, and they're the mysterious Jovians, as you just mentioned. So why don't we talk about a little bit about the Jove, who they are, and more importantly, what have we learned about them in the last year, and how we think that might play as we move forward. Who wants to take the Jove? I guess Uriel, right?
Uriel?
Wait, has Uriel gotten his mic fixed enough to be able to do an introduction?
Is it working now?
Yes,
Yes.
it is. All right,
Yay.
so
Perfect.
Uriel.
Huzzah!
Top success.
All right, that took way too long. So I guess I'll just do a quick rundown of the Jove. I mean,
first-
give me a few
first
minutes,
introduce
not an
yourself.
hour like the last time. What?
First, introduce yourself.
All right. Well, oh yeah, because didn't get to earlier. Yeah, I'm Uriel. Well, it's Uriel Anteovnuecci. I'm tired, and my name is long, and I basically do a lot of stuff to do with ancient race lore, Jove stuff, Drifter stuff. I do lots of theory crafting. I do a lot of data mining with Singularity and Chaos whenever I can, just to see what's coming up next. And I am a member of the Arataka Research Consortium, along with Makoto and the others. And we do a lot of stuff with, the Drifters. So there's that. You can find me on Twitter at Anteovnuecci. It's hard to spell, sorry, but there you go. So you want me to just get to the Jove stuff now, right?
Yes, please.
All right, so the Jove, who are they? They're basically, well, they were at least, the mysterious boogeyman race in New Eden for a very long time, until recently, where we kind of got a bigger, badder one with the Drifters and kind of the Talocan as well. As for their history, though, they were one of the few races who didn't completely collapse following the Eve Gate's collapse, though they did have regressions over a few of their empires. When they came through the Eve Gate, they were technologically destitute, to quote Templar 1, in comparison to the other races, which, by the way, would have included the precursors to the Talocan and some other of the ancient races. The Jove had 3 empires, the first of which was established in the Heaven constellation, Heaven constellation down in Curse, shortly after the Eve Gate closed, because that was where they were originally intending to go. They traveled there in a few big motherships full of primitive cryostasis and VR things made of 2 groups. There was the Architects, which were the ones inside the VR and cryostasis, and there was another group they called the Enheduani, which were the ones that watched them and made sure they got there. Once they reached, they set up stargates, which they had the components for in their motherships, and got underway. They did a lot of, to be really general, just scientific insanity, just experimenting, changing themselves. And when one group tried to basically stifle all that, the Empire kind of splintered and collapsed. For a while, that's all they were, until we get to the second Jove Empire, which was brought back together a while after the first fell apart by a Jove named Miko Bor. He was a ruthless military, strong leader, that sort of thing. And he led a faction called the Tyrants. Now, despite, the name and the connotation, the Tyrants were actually a pretty fair group for leading them. Basically, they brought all the splintered factions of the Jove that were left. They brought them all together, formed the Second Empire. The Second Empire also included the Sleepers, who are, well, the Architects basically are the Sleepers, the ones within the VR construct. And during the Second Empire, basically, the Sleepers ended up becoming the more elite of the society, with the Enheduani still actually existing, but influencing things in the background, like some sort of crazy Jove Illuminati. And the ones on the outside would only get advances from tech that the Enheduani allowed to escape from the construct, which at this time developed time dilation within it. So basically, they'd be able to run time faster inside the construct than outside and advance quicker. The Second Empire completely collapsed when the Jove disease appeared, which basically is a crippling disease that only affects the Jove. It has 2 different versions. One attacks them when they're in their fetus tubes, which is the unborn little baby Jove, I guess, and they just die.
Clone, basically, or they breed through science. They don't have normal babies, so
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I was going to get to that too. They don't breed sexually or anything like that. They literally just grow new Jove in tubes. And yeah, so the first version of the disease will just kill them immediately there. The second one is known to be, as far as we know, inevitable for any Jove, and eventually they'll just begin spiraling down into this just depression where they stop functioning and just eventually just wither away and die. So this caused the total collapse of the Second Empire, at which time a lot of Jove from the outside decided to join the Sleepers in their VR, which apparently is some way they were using to escape the disease. Although a lot of the Jove on the outside ended up thinking that the Sleepers intentionally created the disease to force them to join them, so they kind of persecuted them. The Sleepers ran away, literally left the cluster through wormholes and went to wormhole space, where they set up and closed the door behind them, metaphorically. And that was the end of the Second Jove Empire right there. And after that, they lost most of the, a large amount of the knowledge they had learned and come up with, and all the tech they had created, that sort of thing, all basically disappeared. And the splintered remains of the Second Empire eventually came together, left the wreckage of the old empire, moved to the currently known Jove regions, and set up the Jove Directorate, at which time they began seeing the other empires of New Eden starting to develop, and at which time they likely began setting up their observatories as well, which have records dating back to around the time when all the main races began developing and getting into space. And that's through the end of the Third Empire.
Yep, and it's also worth noting that we just not recently, but in the last year, we've gotten a lot of new information about kind of how all of that played out. One of the interesting things that's kind of worth noting is that it seems that the Henyuani, or not the Henyuani, but what is now known as the Sleepers, the architects at the time, effectively fled from the Jove because they were kind of expected to cure this disease, and then when they couldn't, they were accused of being the creators of it.
Yep.
And so they fled during this time of total collapse of Jove kind of civilization, which I can't remember the name for it. It's like the Dark Times or something, right?
The Shrouded Days, I think.
That's right, because they have like no records or anything like that. But what it appears that happened is that the Sleepers basically headed north, where they landed in what is now Jove region, and they discovered a very interesting structure outside of a sun. Which sun was it?
W477P.
Yeah. And they used that structure in order to transport themselves into the wormhole space. And so they basically...
Although we...
Go on.
I'd like to say we don't know for sure if they use that. We have no confirmation on it, but it seems pretty likely. But we just don't know yet.
Okay, indeed. So from there, the Jove kind of set up shop, where the Sleepers then established kind of their colonies that we now interact with in Anteovnuecci or wormhole space. And then recently, the Jove have been kind of quiet, right? So the Jove are mostly known for giving us capsule technology, which was a key piece to the to making capsuleers. So I'm going to bounce it back over to you guys.
First, a note on unreliable narrators. In the Inheritance Chronicle, where we get a lot of our more recent insight into the Jove sleeper thing, there's a series of comments that imply that they don't even themselves know what really precipitated the collapse in the Shrouded Days, and specifically they seem to imply that the discovery of the Talokan Gate may actually also have precipitated it, that it may not have been a thing that happened during so much as it may also have been sort of a proximal cause. This discovery of this uncollapsed civilization that had space-time manipulation technology far and away beyond what the Jove could think of.
Also, I have to regrettably report that as somebody who has been to W477P on at least a test server, there's nothing out of the ordinary in that system. Planets are all still intact. The star is normal. There's nothing wrong there. Come on,
Move
CCP.
along,
You can
move
you can
along.
at least make the planet shattered and change the sun
I
type,
keep
even though we're
checking
never going to
on
go
the
there.
map to see if it goes shattered, and it hasn't yet, and I'm very sad about
It's
that.
not. I've been there on it's one of the systems you can practice in on Thunderdome.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit more. What it was the Talican doing there? What is this structure? What did they find?
They had what we have been jokingly calling a Dyson swarm, which is basically they had a bunch of little structures just making a cloud around the star, and they were collecting energy. And from what we can tell, the assumption is that the star, what this was a attempt at fueling a completely human controlled wormhole network. So there's a line in Inheritance about the Talican would walk through these wormholes like you or I would walk through a door in a house. Like they would, they treated the wormholes like doorways from one system to another, completely going, just bending space and time to their will, which requires a lot of energy, predictably. And so what's not clear is if this was a completed system or if it was like a stepping stone, a precursor to something far bigger. From what little we're told of the Talican in the Inheritance Chronicle, which is basically the Talican are to the Jove what the Jove are to everybody else, technologically speaking, or even more off the scale than that. For all we know, that really could have just been a precursor and a test. It could have just been, we're doing a small-scale version of this just to see if it works. And, well, it seems to have worked. Mostly. I mean, it obviously didn't stay running, so...
Venial in that chronicle also suggests that there are multiple of these structures, that the star that exploded for Caroline's star was actually just one of several.
And we've not found the others yet, and there's no indication that we necessarily will. There's another thing, because there are so many systems in New Eden that are off the gate network entirely. That's a thing that Falcon and others have said, is that
It's like,
just
what 1 in 3 or something like that?
something like that. It's like basically there are a lot of places in New Eden that have solar systems. They're just not on the gate network. Now, whether they're inhabited or not, we don't know. I mean, they could be, but...
Which makes New Eden unusually dense, but that's another matter entirely.
Yeah.
All right, so besides that, is there any other reason why we should be paying attention to the Jove based on recent events?
I've got one.
Go for it.
Go Mac.
Uriel, if you want to tag it.
Now you can take this one. I already talked on them.
Okay, so the notable thing is that, and this is sort of like far future tinfoil stuff, but I consider it relevant, so hey, perhaps you should as well. CCP on its roadmap has this big question mark new space, and we're approaching that. And they've set up this situation where Jove space is abandoned and where the stations will be falling apart, and so presumably inactive. If CCP wants to start testing out new space with players building stargates, what natural place is there that isn't Jove space?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very important note. We're not saying that that's necessarily the case, but that does seem to be kind of where everything is indicating, doesn't it?
Of course, who knows what the timeline is? It might be a year, it might be 2 years, it might be 20.
But we did
I'm hoping
actually,
it's not going to be 20.
We did actually get some new space with the Caroline stars. We got the shattered wormholes, and then eventually also the drifter wormhole space.
Yeah, so we got, was it 106 new systems all told, or was it 105? Was Thera was Thera one of 100, or was it like 100 and then one?
101, I think.
Yeah, Thera was
Okay.
the extra.
Okay, so we've got 106 new systems in the last 2 years.
All right, and speaking of drifters, because I am the master of segues, they are kind of next up on the docket. The drifters are the new emergent threats, which you saw in the opening trailer, voiced much by our team and other people who have helped contribute for us. So who wants to talk about the drifters? I know that you guys are all chomping out the bit on this one.
Me, I guess? Shall I start off and
Go
then we
for
can
it.
hand it off? Okay, so the first question is, who are the drifters? And the answer is, good question. So there are a lot of options. They could be, for instance, reawakened sleepers emergent from the construct, which is sort of like the Matrix, except for Jove. They could be others, which are sort of like, if you want to continue with the Matrix analogy, Agent Smith, who was created, sort of rose up from the system and is now sort of an independent intelligence, or a set of them. Or it might be some combination, or there might be something else that we haven't anticipated.
So let's dive into the other just a little bit. Who wants to explain the other?
I can take that one if you'd like. I gotta leave soon, so I want to get in as much as I can. So the other, well, okay, so this is the others, but usually people talk about a singular other, which was the first one that showed up. When the others appeared in the sleeper construct, they knew that it was a fake world. The sleepers actually, again with the Matrix looking thing, literally didn't know that their world was fake. So the others were trying to what?
They have forgotten, basically.
Essentially, and they were kept from knowing because of the ones watching them, the Enheduani. So when the others appeared and started trying to tell them all that you're in a fake world, they were basically persecuted, and we can theorize that they were quarantined. There are some things in sleeper sites that might actually point to some of that too. We do know that the others did not have bodies where the sleepers did. The rule of the sleeper construct is that you have to have a body on the outside to be on the inside. And these others popping up, knowing that it's fake, and not having any body to return to on the outside, makes them pretty heretical in the sense of the construct. So eventually, at some point, one of these others was able to escape the construct in a limited way and go straight to Jamyl Sarum's head when she cloned back in 2004, and has been, and was in her head the entire time since. Basically, it influenced a lot of decisions. It's the reason we had the Terran superweapon show up. It knew where to find it. It knew how to use it. It knew how to get them to use it. And there's also evidence that the other was the one trying to have the Isogen 5 catches, which were blown up very early, probably compared to when they were supposed to be, which caused Apocrypha, the one was supposed to happen later.
You're saying a lot of things. We're going to go over them real quick. So the Terran super weapon that Jamyl used, if you look on one of the old videos, you'll see a Minmatar fleet kind of all arrayed out and being mean and nasty, and then an Amarr fleet landing and a single Abaddon shooting a ball of kind of energy at the Minmatar fleet and just blowing them all up. And what that was a secret weapon that chained between all of the different Minmatar ships and turned their shields inward, crushing the different ships like tin cans. But thankfully, it was only fired once.
Well, actually, it was fired a second time as well.
Oh, well, there you
go.
go.
It was actually, it's less known, but it happened earlier in the Empyrean Age book, which probably
was used against the Blood Raider fleet.
Against the Blood Raider fleet. In TIPZ something. I forget the system.
Tips a B.
TTAC IPZB.
Okay. So that was it, yeah. And so finishing off everything with the others, the one in Jamyl's head, it seems that it might have known something was happening when the Drifters began activity, because there is an article about new sleeper activity that showed up shortly before we had our collection for the Tech 3 destroyers that matched the date to when a later scope video came out that said Jamyl Sarum had stopped appearing in public on that date. Later on, obviously, the Drifters came out and apparently killed Jamyl Sarum. Whether or not they actually want to erase the other or maybe do something to take it back, we still don't know for sure. But if we can talk about the connection with Hilen Tukoss, that might get you thinking.
The other thing I want to talk about real quick is that the big thing that the other did was convince Jamyl to begin the Templar project. A lot of this information comes out of Templar 1.
I would recommend reading that book. It basically it's a huge amount of information on the Jove and the sleepers and the story that's happening. That and Eve's source, probably the two most important.
That is correct.
And yeah, what Ash said.
But my point is that in order to create the Templars, what they ended up doing was finding the sleeper enclaves, whatever they call it, and ripping the implants out of the sleepers. Now, as we just talked about, the sleepers were plugged into a virtual a virtual universe that had a rule that one body, one mind. So by ripping these bodies, or by ripping the implants out of these cryostasis frozen or whatever people, they were literally abandoning them in the Matrix effectively. And so we still have no idea what kind of impact that had on the inside of the construct, their culture or whatever. We do know that the others seem to be wanting to convince the sleepers that the construct wasn't safe, or that the construct was fake or whatever. And this kind of genocide that was caused by the Amar trying to create their Templar project would have been a major destabilization to the inside.
Exactly, yeah. I don't really have much more to say on the others for now, other than they all wanted to get out of the construct.
Yeah, so
and I'm going to have to leave now, so that's what I'm going to leave on. Hopefully you guys can take care of the rest real well. Good luck.
Cheers. And how about a tiny bit more other tinfoil for y'all?
Very good. Go on.
Yeah, so very quickly, when we first discovered the Nexus, the unidentified sleeper device hidden away in drifter hives, it was in a configuration we refer to as the space urchin. It was spiny, and it was the first stage of 4 of blah, blah, blah. Very soon after, we found it again in a essentially destroyed or disassembled state. And given the Talican distrust or fear of AI, as we see mentioned in Inheritance, that might be evidence that the drifters have at least some other component. Let's say some component of them is provided by the others. And so they attempted to interface with what's probably a giant Talican static gate, and it sort of went, nope, and self-destructed.
Right, and you can actually go to this site, which I'm showing a picture of the urchin. You can go to the site live on TQ by taking their tour, if no other reason. And it isn't actually an urchin anymore. We now refer to it as the pickup sticks because they've been scattered across. But it still appears as if it could come together, and it looks like it is building some sort of Stargate.
Yep.
There's also more lightning than usual.
I think we'd have to go back to the video, though, to check.
There's always more lightning.
Never not more lightning. Though, let's carry on and touch on quickly what else the Drifters do, because they're still an obviously active participant in the storyline. And
well, the other theory about the Drifters is that they might be, in fact, the Sleepers themselves, not just the others. So why would we believe that they are the Sleepers, and what kind of impact would that have if they... Because the Sleepers themselves are Jove, right? So could it be that the Drifters are Jove, and why would we suspect that?
So if we say that the Drifters are Jove, we're saying it in the sort of like the greater Jove people sense, not necessarily the Jove Directorate, but rather that they are the resurrected or reanimated refugees of the Second Jove Empire, the static extremists, the stasis people that had fled to wormhole space to escape the collapse of the Empire. And if for whatever reason the Sleepers developed the ability or relearned the ability to escape the construct, then they would need to reassemble bodies for themselves as their own have wasted away, and they would naturally be interested in defending themselves against the depredations of Capsuleers, which would be something in support of, or rather supported by, the fact that there are now Arithmos Tyrannos, which are, say, sleeper battleships that come to the aid of Class 5 and Class 6 sleeper sites.
It's also worth noting that there was a Drifter autopsy done last year, and it was discovered that most of the physiology of the Drifters are, in fact, Jovian.
Oh, yeah. And it's also noted in the Emergent Threats trailer. You see them tractor beaming out a Jove corpse from an enclave with the Drifter hive in the background.
Are you sure that was a Jove corpse and not actually a pilot from one of the ships that they blew up in the trailer? Because they do kill several ships in that thing.
I think it's both, actually. I think
it was supposed to be a nod to the reference of the unexpected behavior of the Seekers, like scooping up corpses. Because if I remember right, CCP did not expect that they were going to do that. It just was some kind of happy accident. Players took note of it, and then CCP ran with it.
Yeah, so there's a bit at the very end where they destroy, I think it's a raven, and there's the pulling of corpse there, but I also think there's something involving the Enclave.
Yes.
Because it was our first shot, or our first sighting of the Hive in the background.
That is correct. So in the Emergent Threats trailer, you see the Hive, and you see one of the the Sleeper Enclaves, and you see a broken pod, which is an asset that you will actually see in the Hives. Now, if you go to the center of the Hive, you'll see that the Hive is almost smashed into one of the Drifter Conclaves, and so it appears that they're extracting one of the sleeper bodies.
Yep. And not just one, actually. I think each Hive usually will have about 7. So the implication is that they're constantly pulling more and more bodies from these enclaves, and they just sort of drop them when the players come in.
Okay, so anything else about the origin of the Drifters, or do you want to talk more about their behavior?
I think, we can tinfoil all day about their origins, but right now we don't necessarily have anything decisive. Now, when it comes to behavior, what they do and what they may be doing will be relevant for what we see them doing coming forward. Which is to say that they salvage the old Jove observatories, they're gathering equipment. They may have been the ones that had raided sleeper caches that started decloaking about the time of Carolyn Star and Thera. Obviously, they invaded a Mars base and assassinated Empress Jamyl I. May she rest in peace. And they also blew up Hilen Tukoss, who was the head of Arak Jalan, as we saw in a broadcast, and may have, and by may have I mean in all likelihood did, impersonate him to get samples of Jove DNA before they start appearing in force. Oh, and their ships are bloody gorgeous.
Indeed.
And also deadly.
Their ships, no, they're not that deadly.
So one of the interesting things about the Drifters is that, they've been in our game now for a little over a year, but they have been largely tangential for most people. They're not, there's no real good way to earn ISK from killing them. I understand that some people have discovered that may or may not be true, but I mean, like, for the vast majority of people, you don't see lots of people just killing Drifters to make ISK. There's not, the story has been kind of slow and in the background. However, we know that in the next expansion in November, we're getting our first proper in-game, fully voiced acted storyline, which is the new player experience. And in that new player experience, the Drifters have attacked, and your Empire is requiring you to help them fight back against the Drifter forces. So it's obvious that these are things that are not going away. There was a bit of a setback last year when it came to their AI, because the Drifters have been, on a technical level, kind of a test bed for new AI and new strategies for PvE experiences for EVE Online. And it looks like we're going to be definitely entering into the next chapter of this story. Okay, so is there anything else about the Drifters, or should we move on?
Do you want to talk about... I want to talk about the ISK and real quick, and then we'll talk about ISK and then the AI briefly. I won't go into depth to it.
Shoot.
So ISK-wise, they drop blue loot. Unfortunately, there's no real easy way to solo a Drifter, and that will be even less true on the patch because of the command rush changes. And there's really no easy way to farm them. So while you can make ISK killing drifters, it will not be anywhere close to what you can make anywhere else. As far as their AI goes, CCP's actually done some really innovative stuff with their AI. Drifters seem to have an aggro table that is probably that's the first step towards making good PvE in any game, is having an aggro table. So as far as the drifter behaviors, they've done a lot with it and turn it into something that's a really compelling experience to fight.
In addition, it's worth noting that the balance of drifters is such that a large number of alpha players will actually be significantly more effective than 1 or 2 omega players.
No. No.
You're telling me a swarm of alpha caracals is going to be better than 2 omegas and marauders?
Okay, well, you're not going to get 2, but I mean, if give me 6 omegas and I'll be, yeah.
That's fair. But what I'm saying is that the drifters are designed, unlike other PvE in EVE, are not designed to be soloed by any means. It has a lot of counters against that. It's not something that you can just bring a bunch of power and overwhelm, but the big counter to the drifters seem to be numbers.
There are a number of solutions, but let's move on from Doctrine Talk, just because we can.
Well, let's put it this way. You are talking to 3 people who can personally tell you you're wrong, but from personal experience, but it's really not worth getting into the details of it.
Yeah.
Ali is a master on this front, gotta say.
Yeah, all 3 of us are.
Yeah. So on the design decisions point, though, one thing that I do want to say on the ISK farming, I think that this was intentional by CCP. They didn't want drifters to be a farmable ISK-making content source. It seems like they're trying to make it something that's interesting, engaging to do from like a lore perspective, but to ensure that it's not farmable until they're ready to progress the story to a point that they hit their big thing, which might be drifter inclusion somehow in like player built stargates would be my guess. So it seems like they're trying to stage it so that the people who advance the story are the people who are interested in the story, while not necessarily excluding other people, just sort of not providing much ISK content for them.
Yeah, my drifter killing has absolutely nothing to do with how much ISK I may or may not get from killing drifters. They kill them for Jamyl, so we have to kill every single one of them, salt the earth, blow up their hives, and genocide is on the menu.
All told, you really don't make a ton of ISK from just shooting.
You really don't.
Drifters. The incursions, totally different story. There was money. There was definitely money to be made doing that. However, now that the incursions are gone, you kill a drifter, you may get like 3 or 4 Antikythera elements. Kind of varies. And I think it's like 5 mil in blue loot. You really don't get a lot for the amount that you have to throw at these ships.
Yeah, 10 million from a Hikanta, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's
really
not.
It is not a ISK positive activity. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I think if you do a whole hive, I'll just give you a number. If you do a whole hive, it'll take you maybe around 45 minutes to an hour to actually do the bit, and that's not counting time where you have to find the damn thing. If you kill every sleeper in there and every drifter that you find, you'll probably walk out with like 100 million ISK, if that. So considering how it's going to take a fleet of, at least 6 or 7 people, probably more, you're looking at, 2 hours for 15 million ISK for people. That's pretty crappy ISK per hour.
Yeah. If you're doing this content, you're doing it because you're interested and you're not doing it for any kind of ISK.
So, I'm, of course, on the opposite side. I think that we have more in common with the drifters than the humans that we come from, and that we should attempt to make an agreement with them. But we'll see where that goes.
We see, Ash, that's where you're wrong.
But there is actually another group of people who are also very interested in the drifters and in the new wormhole space that has opened up, which are the Sisters of Eve. Who wants to dig into the Sisters of Eve? All right, I will.
I'm being nominated, but I think I'll let you start.
Yeah, so the Sisters of Eve is a ostensibly charitable religious organization that exists in New Eden. They are religious in the sense that they believe... Whoa, did I just die? I did. 1 second. Oh, I didn't even notice the sleep. I got killed by the sleepers.
Rip.
You go ahead and take it then.
Okay, so the Sisters of Eve are a largely humanitarian and science-based organization that focuses on research of the Eve Gate and various other sundries. Of late, their exploits involve finding their way into a wormhole system that was kind of off the grid from the rest of what the Capsuleers had access to, which was eventually revealed, and we now know it as Thera. It's the only wormhole system with actual stations in it. I'm not counting citadels that players have put up. There's 4 stations in there. It's a really, really big system, and it connects to pretty much everywhere in the game. But in the last, was it 6-7 months? I'm not sure when they put the flotillas in, Mac. You might know.
I want to say that it preceded the Citizen Science Initiative by about a month and a half.
Right. So it was a couple months before FanFest, so beginning of this year, basically. They now have flotillas in each of the hive systems, consisting of a large number of collidable objects shaped like Nestors, Stratios, and Asteros. The citizen science thing that Mac refers to is Project Discovery, where you're basically analyzing what they're calling Jovian or drifter tissue samples and identifying different cellular structures. There's a good shot from Ash on the stream. I'm obviously delayed, but so initially we had noticed there was a little can next to these where you could dump things in, and what you could dump in were these Jove tissue samples or Jovian DNA sample or something like that, and they would drop from drifters when you killed them. And you drop them in and you get like Sisters probes back. It was really dumb. Like you weren't going to get anything useful out of them. But they've basically just been kind of sitting and chilling in there for quite a bit of time now, and nobody's really been quite sure what they're up to. But now we have this latest news with the Alpha clones, where basically the Sisters of Eve came up with some new cloning technology and just handed it out to the Big Four and kind of gave the middle finger to Concord and the Society of Conscious Thought. And we're kind of guessing at this point that that's what they were up to, is that they were using the drifters as and what they were doing as the basis for the cloning tech.
Well, it's also important to note that they've started offering drifter drugs as a reward for the Project Discovery Jovian tissue sample analysis. So they're obviously doing a lot of experiments with these drifters.
The interesting thing about that, though, is that you can get those drugs without ever touching Project Discovery, because the drugs are also a reward from doing from completing specific tasks within each of the hives. Each hive has a different drug type available, and in order to get them, you have to go up each side of the hive, and then you have to hack a can. You get out a sequence item, which is named for the hive, and then it's either 0 or 1. Then you take both of the sequences and you put them into a can in the pickup sticks room in the Nexus. And you get back a couple Antikythera elements and then 10 units of the drug that's specific to that hive. So you don't have to do Project Discovery to get these, which raises the question of where exactly the Sisters of Eve are getting them. Are they going through and doing this thing with the sequences, or have they gotten samples and are manufacturing it on their own? We don't know.
Well, I think we almost have to assume that they have even more bases that we just aren't aware of, given the fact that they managed to get themselves to Thera before Thera joined the general wormhole network. And they were there for quite a bit of time, given the amount of infrastructure they set up. So I would not be surprised to discover that the Sisters have delved even deeper into either Drifter or other sleeper space and are kind of harvesting things from there.
Countervailing opinion. So Drifter drugs reference Inferno, which is the Talakan tech level drug that's in the backstory from a while ago. And the implication with the boosters is that they have some sort of funky nanite computing thing hidden in a space-time fold, essentially. So the drug itself has curved space involved in it somehow, which in the first place is freaking weird. In the second place is, so far as we know, not necessarily something that the general population of Eve has the ability to do, quite possibly including the Sisters. the question ends up being, with this new cloning technology as well, and also with the fact that the gates were unlocked and the drifters seem to want people to align these stargates, could the sisters be colluding with the drifters?
It's oddly.
Oh, that's a horrible thought.
It
Yes, it is.
It is not totally out there, however. Although it's interesting because the sisters are not, or that is not the only conspiracy theory that has to do with sisters. One of the ones that a lot of people like to point to is the fact that the sisters, the head of the current Sisters of Eve is a member of the Serpentis family, which is the same family that runs the Serpentis Corporation. However, in a lot of ways, that actually may be a red herring. Who wants to elaborate on that?
For what it's worth, there's also the fact that the sisters are not exactly known for liking capsuleers. Like, they are really not noted for that. They, in fact, are noted for hating the shit out of us.
Yes,
they
which
really,
makes it all the
really
more
do
bizarre.
not like us.
Which makes it all the more bizarre that they seem to be actively promoting new generations of capsuleers for some bizarre reason.
So,
or quality Xerox copies. That's what the alpha clones are.
a couple of points that are sort of funky here. One, we've never encountered a Sisters of Eve wreck in the Drifter hives ever, even though they've evidently been going through the hives in the background. Also, it could be that, the Sisters and the Drifters are out in systems we have never seen before, we assume. Could it be that they found something that looks like an honest existential threat, and they're now at the point of panicking and going, oh shit, we need more capsuleers?
It's worth noting that there have been several emergency councils by Concord and elsewhere, including towards the beginning of this, I believe even before Caroline Starr, where the sisters briefed information to Concord and the other empires. So it is very possible that the Sisters of Eve either A, are working in collusion with the Drifters, or B, attempting to find some sort of solution to what they see as the real threat. Because if anybody knows the grand scheme of this threat, it's going to be the Sisters of Eve, followed up closely by probably the Society of Conscious Thought. But going back to that other point, I really want to kind of debunk this theory because it's one of the most widely talked about ones with the Sisters of Eve when it comes to trying to do conspiracy theories with them. What is the nature of the relationship between the head of the Sisters of Eve and her brother?
Obviously, they're siblings.
Yes. But
they're not particularly fond of one another, I believe.
Yeah, so Serpentis, the brother, kind of took over his father's empire that had fallen apart. The Serpentis Corporation was a drug manufacturing corporation from back in the day, and when drugs were largely made illegal, that kind of crushed the Serpentis business. So the father kind of lost all of his fortune, and the children had to deal with that. And one of the children dealt with that by joining the Sisters of Eve and working up the ranks and eventually taking over. The brother went off and purchased a single system in null security space and created effectively a space Tortuga in Serpentis Prime, and made enough deals with enough drug runners and criminals and all that kind of stuff to gain enough power that he could hold off against Gallente, and then basically resumed drug manufacturing under the old designs, which is how the Serpentis kind of got kickstarted. So even though these two siblings are, oh look, they're related, there's no necessarily reason to suspect that they're working together. Sorry, proceed with anything else about the Sisters of Eve. Or we can move on.
We probably should, since we're a little over an hour in.
Yep, we're going to move on to the next character, which is actually the first character, well, actually the second major character that we've talked about that is probably not alive, and that is Hilen Tukoss. And I'm just going to drop the mic and let you guys talk.
Rest in peace, dear sir.
Best light
Highland,
ever.
that is. Highland, that is. Not you, Ash. You're still with us for now.
All right, Morwen, why don't you explain who Hilen Tukoss is or was, and why is he being talked about?
So, about, I'd say, close to 6 years ago now, around the time when CCP started up their live events team for the first time after the Aurora division of ISD was disbanded, they had two different arcs of live events. There was one going on mostly focusing on the upcoming incursion expansion for the Sancha, and then there was also a more science and kind of collaboration-based event series focused on a entity called Erectulon, which is a Caldari term for to create descent. And it was basically a scientific and research organization that was more or less run by the players. CCP Dropbear played a actor character called Hilen Tukoss, who defected from the state. He used to work for Xenobiotech and moved to work for Eifer and Company in Aram, which is a system in Minmatar space. And Erectulon was basically just a bunch of players trying to bring background lore into the light through in-character means. So we had people working on revealing the Sleepers storyline, which I will admit kind of had a bit of a tragic end since Templar 1 gave it all away, and somebody actually figured out most of it maybe 2 weeks before the book was released. So, but it was the whole idea was basically using what was available in character to bring stuff that we knew about out of character or theorized out of character, making it available for everyone else. And it was there was a lot of interesting work done by the players. If you go to the system of Aram, you can go to Site 1, which is a Dead Space site in the system that has all these little structures and stuff, and you'll actually see some familiar names on some of the items that you can get by running around to the different structures in the site. But Hilen disappeared with the end of the live event arc, and the events team kind of got shut down for a while, and he didn't really reappear until the Drifter stuff started taking back. As Makoto mentioned, the Drifters like nuked him and then kind of impersonated him on the forums, and he showed up in a scope video or two and stuff like that.
I'm actually going to pause you right there. I have the
Sure.
scope video queued up, so we're going to view the final broadcast of Hilen Tukoss.
This disturbing recording was recently acquired by the Scope, and despite DED protests, we believe that the public has the right to know.
This is Hilen aboard Scout Vessel Erectulon. There's an emergency into an uncharted hundreds of these signal, but we for as long as we can notify the DED. We may be facing a possible major. More and more ships have been arriving at this enormous structure. Detected and it is possible that things head.
It has been confirmed that the person speaking is indeed Hilen Tukoss, former employee of Eifer and Company. The date of the recording is still unknown. A spokesperson for Eifer claims a search and rescue has already been organized in partnership with the Sisters of Eve. They are offering reward for information leading to the whereabouts of Hilen Tukoss and his crew. Officials are urging the population to stay calm as the footage is investigated further. This is Lena Amber, reporting for The Scope.
All right, and we're back. So that is the supposed fate of Hilen Tukoss. However, there are 3 really good possibilities of what might have happened to him. The first being that he may in fact be well and truly dead. Reports are that his infomorph cloning did not work correctly and that he is just simply dead. The second possibility is that the drifters have him. We know that the drifters have the ability to kind of disrupt our signal, maybe not the fluid router itself, but the signals towards the fluid routers, because they're the way it works, whatever. And if they intercepted his infomorph, given the amount of technology that these guys have, they could have potentially have snatched him up and have his infomorph, his mind imprisoned, or perhaps part of their collective. Alternatively, there was also an IFRIC & Co. representative or employee that was held in detention, and literally nothing has ever... we have never heard about what's happened to him. There was a lot of fallout from this event. In fact, the Scope News Network got in a huge amount of trouble for even showing us this broadcast, and this is clearly a very sensitive issue by the Empires, and in particular Concord. With that, I hand it back to my panel.
Of course, it's a sensitive issue by Concord because they've been failing on the drifters from day one. So obviously they don't want anybody to know about the drifters. So
wait. We're expecting Concord to do something?
Well, no, let's be fair. We would like them to not suck, but in all fairness, what do we expect them to do? Suck.
Exactly.
Odo Karachi evidently, does a lot of lifting. How about that?
Okay, yeah. So Odo Karachi lifts. He lifts very much, but that's about it. And gets angry at people.
As an Empyrean that has to be policed by Concord, I would rather prefer them to suck.
So I mean, the broadcast, there's a lot of drifter ships, if that's, so.
I believe Juliana Soter at one point. I think it was him. It might have been somebody else, but I'm pretty sure that Soter actually took a couple frames from that and counted the number of drifter ships on screen in that frame, and there were like over 200 at one point.
So here's the interesting thing about the drifters. All the hive systems are named after defensive terms somehow. So you have like Vidette, Redoubt, Barbican, Sentinel. They're all defensive in nature. Conflux doesn't fit the mold, but whatever. So we've not really seen any of their industrial base. If the hives are used for manufacturing, it does not show that in game. We have no evidence that any of the hives are actually used for manufacturing that we currently have access to. But there are a lot of drifters, and there are drifters being made. We killed a lot of them during the Events of the Throne Worlds campaign. Now, I'm going to say there were in the high thousands of drifters killed in the Defense of the Throne Worlds campaign. So,
you said that there's no manufacturing, but from the Emergent Threats trailer, the inside of those hives clearly have the ability to not only create more drifters from clones, but it looks like that was a shipyard.
I'm not going to disagree with the threats trailer. What I'm saying is, in game, we've seen no evidence of manufacturing at all. Like, if you go and look at a hive and you say, there is nothing that when you go look at a hive say, oh, well, that's clearly for manufacturing. It does not look clearly for manufacturing at all. So whether or not that's the same...
If anything, the hives look like they're giant, they look like they're giant collections of the canopic things. Like you'd expect that they're basically giant mass graves or mass matrix plug-in locations because they're just so big.
Oh, actually, interesting interjection. In Inheritance, Delegate Zero uses the term hive and sleeper hive, and this was asked about later because, sleeper hive, do you mean drifter hive? What does he mean by hive? And that sort of combination. And his specific response was that he used hive as a differentiation from enclave because a hive has the cloning apparatus. So that's basically the center of the biotech, the remaining biotech that the drifters or sleepers have. But that was, of course, a sort of a side conversation, and whether that leads into full production, we don't necessarily know. The most important thing remains, however, that the hives are appear to be outlined offenses. And outlined offenses of what? Well, we don't know, but presumably it'll be shiny.
And explodey.
Hopefully.
Insert science picture here, right?
Red button, ladder to press.
Yes, exactly.
So, but Tukoss's broadcast about, oh, the drifters have, thousands of ships, be worried. So that invasion happened, but it was fought back. But still, the industrial base seems to be out of our reach in terms of our ability to disrupt it. So, unfortunately, the last warning of Hilen Tukoss went unheeded because we were not able to stop the drifters' plans, only fight them off later with great loss of life.
Yeah, so let's go back to the fact that Hilen Tukoss was actually reemerged by a post on the Evo forums. Who wants to talk about that and why it might be important?
So there were a couple of things that were fairly interesting. There were a total of 3 posts. The first of which was sort of saying, "Hey, Capsuleers, I'm back again. How you doing? Great seeing this colonization of interesting places, including Thera. Oh wait, you don't know about that? Then there was another one that was asking for Jovian bits, the bits of Baniu, the ambassador that got scattered to hell and back because of a teleporter accident. And then there was a final one that appeared to be from Tukoss himself, as opposed to drifters posing as Tukoss, saying that, hey, I'm trapped in this jail. It appears to be in a Wolf Riot system. And what's interesting about the first 2 and then this one with Tukoss is that the first 2 had a lot of weird syntax issues, as if it was a computer program pretending to be Tukoss. And then the last one had just sort of this staticky effect, like the transmission was being blocked or intercepted.
Right.
Also,
and it's also worth noting that they happened at a time, like, how did it happen in the timeline? Where did it fall in the timeline of things?
Oh, notably, it's after Tukoss was presumably shot down by the drifters, given the window of time that Concord or Ephir indicated that broadcast may have come. Which is to say that it's a very strong support for the theory that his infomorph was intercepted by the drifters, analyzed, and then shenanigans followed.
Also, the Corp Tukoss was at Eiffel and Co. I might be mispronouncing that. Eiffel and Co. That's actually pretty closely tied to the SOE, Sisters of Eve. I know that was the corporation that was tied to SOE in with the Stark Manir issue. So,
yeah.
And go ahead.
Cheers. I was going to say you'll also see the Eiffel and Co. logo on, I think, both the Astro and Stratios. It's one of the corporations that was part of the consortium that assisted in the production of that. And they're now also associated with Upwell, just if you want a tinfoil for maximum creepiness.
We'll be getting to Upwell in just a second. Is there anything else to cover when it comes to Hilen Tukoss, drifters, and that whole chain?
His brain was tasty with fava beans?
Yes, actually, this was actually a really cool example of Eve players, as players interacting with the lore itself. So Lucas managed to scoop up a brain fragment of Hilen Tukoss during the expedition that discovered his body in game. And how did that go?
Shenanigans ensued, to put it
Not
briefly.
well.
So, long and short is that we, by pure dumb luck, ended up, for our first hive operation ever, in the hive that had Tukoss's corpse. In hindsight, we should have known, oh wait, it's a Wolf Riot system, something matches here, but, at that time we were actually trying to avoid it because we figured that we'd be in a shield comp. Anyway, so shenanigans happened. We all died in a fire, excepting Lucas, who kept chucking drones out of the bay and running from the Hikanta Tyrannos, and tried to scoop Hilen Tukoss's corpse. Of course, it was an LCO, so it was anchored, but there was a proximity trigger that dumped a cerebral slice in his cargo. And then shenanigans followed, as said. We published a little cool science thing, and then Concord threatened massive bounties on the people that were involved.
Yep, and ultimately, Lucas, somebody else tell me his last name. Raholen, thank you. Lucas Raholen is a Amar holder, and so they ultimately kind of put the screws on him through that, and the Amar called upon his honor to turn in the slice, which is how that particular chain ended.
It wasn't honor. It was they threatened to strike him from the Book of Records, which is essentially excommunicate, condemn to oblivion. So yeah,
didn't stop Lysis.
Yeah, well, Lysis is special, okay?
All right.
Well played,
we
Lysis.
love you, Lysis, but you're special.
This is why my drift drops take a goon along, and if we find anything that's shiny that Concord might particularly want, we're making sure that it goes with them, and that way we can decide later.
Yeah, I'm still grumpy with Lucas for turning that over. That would have been so fun.
So moving on, once again, we have another key player in this whole thing, which is Matshi Raish, which is actually probably one of the less well-known people for those of you, well, besides Hilen Tukoss, for the people that haven't really followed the lore. But he appears to be only becoming more important as time goes on. So why don't we talk about Matshi Raish and the Society of Conscious Thought?
Raish needs to die 1,000 deaths for what he did.
Wow. Okay, that seems harsh. He just
one down, 999 to go.
I was on both those kill mails, and I'm happy to get more.
As the panel leader of this whole thing, I have to remind my audience that Liz has a very specific perspective that she represents. That is not what everyone feels, but either way. All right, so
just loud about it. We'll put it that way.
I'm an unabashed Jamylite in game, and that's kind of my shtick. And I keep it going even on these things because it's fun to have a certain point of view to argue for.
It's great.
In fairness, CCP has basically said some analog of this happens in character whenever we do it, and they basically said that by showing all of our butts on the Shattered Worlds trailer.
That's
exactly.
fair.
So,
all right, back to the society.
Right. So I'll tell you why Raish deserves to die. The appearance before Empress Jamyl was assassinated by drifters, Raish shows up in a Gnosis battlecruiser into Sarum Prime, the Amar having a great ceremony to remember the battle and everybody that died, and Empress Jamyl gave a great speech, and Raish shows up in a Gnosis, and he starts to entosis her ship, her avatar, EF Seraph. So, that's unusual because players can't actually entosis other ships.
Right. It's worth noting that what we see as entosis is actually an effect that comes from the sleepers, or the circadian seekers and the drifters, which is effectively scanning things. And the entosis technology is the projection of your infomorph into another tech. So by doing so, it isn't like he was trying to claim sovereignty over Jamyl. What he was doing was projecting his mind, either into her ship or into her mind.
And he said he was there to investigate an existential threat. It was all fine by Concord, blah, 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 blah. He does his scan. He says, oh, I got what I came for. Well, as soon as he says that, and like way too freaking late, the Amar, I don't know if it was Empress Jamyl, if it was her guard, and I forget, unfortunately, but they set him suspect and they say, everybody kill him, he's bad, he's not allowed to be here, this is sovereign Amar space, and he's been threatening the Empress, right? So we shoot him, we kill him, we pot him, we send him back to Jove space, where he wakes up, and then that's where the Chronicle of Inheritance starts off. Literally, like right after that event is where Inheritance starts. So
quick thing, I want to say that he reappears in Geminate, which is, say, where the Society has their stations.
Okay, yeah, Geminate. So that's kind of like his first appearance on this kind of arc. And then later, Inheritance happens, and so the Jove go ahead and they, leave. Most of them, they go off to the Grey Havens, and they give the SOCT their whole seat on Concord, and he goes and takes it. Now, when he goes into the council chambers of Concord's and Inheritance, the Amar representative says, he needs to be tried and executed for assassination of the Empress, that he's somehow responsible for it. But Raish just says, we're not going to do that. Like, I know these things. So Raish knew about the other in regards to Empress Jamyl.
Well, that was pretty clear from his discussion with Veniel.
Yeah, so
the two of them literally talked about this.
Of course.
What's not clear is how he caught wind of it and what made him go and why he knew to go and do that in the first place. However, that conversation he had with Veniel pretty strongly implies he didn't take anything out with him.
But there's also the fact that
real quick,
the Amar might know.
It's worth noting that Veniel is one of the last remaining Jove, as revealed through inheritance.
Yeah. So it's likely that the Amar at this point in time know that, or at least the upper tier of the Amar leadership are aware that there was something in Jamyl's head, which might also tie into the fact of why the body was never officially found. It's likely that the Amar have possession of it and are in fact covering it up somehow. But so that's where Raish really first stepped on the scene. He's been the SOCT representative to Concord, and he actually called for a ceasefire against the Drifters for while we went and understood them for a bit, so he can get screwed there too.
Well, yeah, that was one of those things where I think CCP just sort of planted it just to see what would happen. It was, and we can achieve peace with the Drifter. We can come to an understanding. Of course, this understanding, considering Drifter preferences, would probably involve all players leaving wormhole space, so, that's going to happen.
I'd like to note that the Drifters have never been hostile to me. We get along fine.
They killed Jamyl. They have to die. That's literally the entire line of reasoning right there.
If they just give us all of their tech, then we can shake hands and part ways.
All right, so let's take a step back, though. Who are the Society of Conscious Thought, and why is Raish this big dude anyways?
So, the Society originally arose as a Jovian exploration of spirituality, and it became, over time, this sort of shadow government for the Jove that was also an educational foundation. Since then, they've since fallen from grace. They're no longer really a Jovian institution, though that is their lineage, and they're sort of the recipients of the Directorate's legacy. And they're known at this point for having widely scattered kitzes, which are, say, fortified school outposts that are self-contained, where they educate people that are promising. And it's been noted in the lore that they have this uncanny knack for picking people who end up in important positions, and whether this is product of society meddling or just because their education is so profoundly effective, it's never really said, but it's one of those background tinfoil things.
SOCT also gave us the Gnosis battlecruiser, the 10-year anniversary.
Yeah, the Apotheosis, and they're giving us a new destroyer this coming fall. Actually, 3 weeks? 4 weeks?
They also gave us skill injectors.
And honestly, there are references in the deep lore to the Society managing the skill book system or having set it up.
Yes.
So
yes. The very old learning skills that were taken out many years ago. The second tier learning skills, because you basically could train them and get 10 bonus points to all your attributes, 5 for each skill. The second one were basically described as advanced SOCT classes in various things, like remembering details for eidetic memory and stuff like that.
Interesting detail on the Society. In the first place, they're definitely pro-capsuleer. I mean, they're, as said, inheritors of the Directorate's legacy. They're also, in a lot of the backstory, set up as the antithesis of the Sisters, whereas the Sisters are this quasi-mystical voodoo, we want to reopen the gate, we hate capsuleers thing. The Society is very much materialist, scientific, and pro-capsuleer, and they clash a number of times. The Sisters usually using nonviolent methods, the Society being maybe a little bit less so.
Right. And recently, the Society of Conscious Thought has gone from being kind of mysterious and fringe and only mentioned once every 5 years when CCP wants to hand out something cool, and has taken on a much bigger role in EVE lore politics through inheritance, which is actually the name or the reason why that chronicle was named that. So now the Society of Conscious Thought has effectively inherited all of the authority and rights of the Jovian Empire, which the effect of which basically puts Raish on the Inner Council as one of the 5 representatives of the major empires.
One of the interesting things about that is that the inheritance also implies that the reason we had been complaining that Concord was ineffective, one of the reasons that Concord was kind of implied to be ineffective was the fact that it did not have a full inner circle. So the implication might be that Concord, with a full council now, can more effectively make decisions.
That is correct. So the original intention of Concord was to have the 5 nations all have, or the 5 empires all have equal vote or equal say, which is why Concord has the 5 stars, the Jovian being the 5th star. But with the Jovians missing, that means it was 2v2. And
No, the Concord enters. There's 4 representatives from Concord, and there's 5 representatives from the Empire, and they all get to make their say.
But it was still broken down even then. It was
because it was a full deadlock.
Council.
Right.
Yeah, it was a deadlock because the Concord people were 4, and there were 4 empires represented. So even if the empires banded together, they'd still have to get the Concord people to agree, and it was deadlock.
And now they have the SOCT, so if all 5 empires can override Concord. So
my point being is that we might see a slightly more effective Concord in the future, but I will believe it when I see it.
Actually, I think the empires will walk all over Concord, to be completely honest. Given the failures of Concord recently, I don't think that many empires have a lot of respect for Concord. The Minmatar Republic sure as hell don't have respect for Concord. The Amar Empire probably have even less respect for Concord. So, and if you look at, the Gallente Federation and the Caldari State, I'm not sure how Concord pro they are, but probably not either. So,
I'm pretty sure Roden and the Black Eagles don't really have respect for anybody besides Roden and the Black Eagles.
Probably.
Yeah, and in the state, it probably depends a lot on which political faction you are. Odds are liberals are generally pro-Concord-ish, whereas patriots are sort of like, are they useful for reclaiming Caldari Prime? No?
I think Concord is mostly just seen as a shield from the baseliners against us, really. Like, that's their biggest role, is to protect baseliners from Empyreans.
I would say that one of the reasons why Concord hasn't been unseated by the empires is that no one wants to make the first step against Concord, because then you are immediately attacked not just by Concord, but the other 2 of the 4 empires that are against
it. Opens you up to reprisal from not just Concord, but everybody else, because at that point, you would basically have to have a concerted, coordinated effort from all 4 empires, or 5, I guess, in order to actually have an effect, because it's better off for any of the other 3 empires to just kind of sit there and either do nothing or to help Concord when you step out of line.
All right, so when Raish entered into the Inner Council and demonstrated his right to be a member of it at the end of Inheritance, his first act as a full member of the Inner Council wasn't to talk about the Drifter threats, wasn't to condemn the Sisters of Eve. He asked about Upwell Consortium, which is our next topic. So who are Upwell Consortium? I guess I can take this if nobody else can, but who are Upwell and what are they up to? Is it me? I think it's me. Okay, so...
yeah, go with this one.
Okay, you can start with this one. It's okay. We can all take turns.
Yeah, so the story of Upwell begins with a guy named Yoni. Or Yanni. I'm so bad with names. Jeez. All right. So this guy was the dude who formed Outer Ring Excavations. And Outer Ring Excavations was just a normal prospecting group out in the wastes around Gallente space, or in the nullsec there, trying to strike a fortune. And while there were many of these kinds of things, he managed to get lucky enough to basically strike gold, and B, shrewd enough to keep it away from the Gallente and other enemies. I think he found a big spud main deposit. I don't remember exactly. But either way, in the end, he formed Outer Ring Excavations and made it into the biggest thing in resource processing in Nullsec, especially the Outer Ring region. He used Mordu's Legion as security task force, Mordu's Legion being a mercenary organization from that was formed just after or because of the Caldari Gallente War, headed by a guy named Mordu, who are very good at security forces and just kind of doing cool stuff. And they like long-term contracts. So Outer Ring Excavation got into a contract with Mordu as a defense system. Yoni was very, very successful. Outer Ring was very, very successful. Eventually, he retired and handed it off to his partner, who I can't remember that dude's name at all because he isn't important. That dude was way more aggressive and almost abused the Mordu's Legion and attacked Sancha space, I believe, and ultimately, or no, it was Serpentis, duh. So he attacked Serpentis space, which was defended by the Angel Cartel. The Angel Cartel defends Serpentis much in the same way that Mordu defend Or, and that was actually, it did not go well. And ultimately, the Serpentis struck back not through military force, but through acquisition. The Serpentis, being much more shrewder businessmen, literally hostile takeovered and bought out Or. And at this point, because Yanni had retired, he wasn't really in a position to do anything about it. But he was unhappy about it and vowed to seek his revenge eventually. Fast forward approximately 9 or 10 years, and we now have an organization known as Upwell Consortium, which is an agreement between several corporations from all 4 empires that have come together to build products specifically engineered for Capsuleers. And so these guys are the dudes that have created all of the new structures that we're getting. They created this citadels, and now they are working on the engineering complexes and drilling platforms and so on and so forth. So, of course, Upwell was fantastically successful right away. You know, everybody saw the intense potential of money and power that they would have. They got backings from very big members, including the Intaki Bank, Mordu's Legion, and whatnot. And as almost like their first act, repurchased or reacquired Or from the Serpentis and attacked the Serpentis strongholds, thereby creating basically a huge war between the two, which has kind of played out over the course of the last year. So far, Upwell has asked us Capsuleers to basically smash up the Serpentis twice, once through Operation Frostline, and then a second time with I can't remember its name. Oh, Shadow of the Serpent event. So that's kind of where we're at with Upwell. They seem to have a lot of power, but that's what I know. So I'm going to hand it back to you guys.
I mean, that covers most of the bases of who they are, what they're doing. I mean, we know very clearly that they have a much larger place to play, or a much larger role to play in the story to come. It is worth noting that some of the systems that we've seen come out for Citadels, like all the various super weapons, some of them are Upwell developed, and some of them actually come from the Society, which is an interesting wrinkle.
There's only one super weapon that's for the Keepstar that's Upwell developed. They had no development with the other Doomsdays that were available for Titans. In fact, the Amar Empire was the primary developer of one. The Gallente got a hold of it, changed it around. They were the primary developer of the second, and the SOCT were the primary developer of the third. But Upwell had no development with the Titan Doomsdays, just the Keepstar Doomsday, and there's only one version of that.
All right. Well, if that about covers Upwell, we can actually move on. I'd actually like to circle back. We put a lot of focus at the very beginning with Empress Catiz.
Yeah, according to the scope video, it's Catiz.
Oh yeah, because we trust CCP on how to pronounce things, right?
Julianus Soter.
All right, so let's go
Galore.
over kind of each of the other races in turn, and talk about who their leadership is. So we're going to begin with, I know I have the Minmatar here, but we're going to start with the Gallente Federation. Who's in charge of the Federation, and why are they terrifying?
Jacus Roden is in charge.
The reason he's terrifying is because he looks about as close to Voldemort as you can get with the character editor. He is the man who must not be reelected.
Yeah,
except he was in a
late.
landslide.
I call rigged.
So Jacus Roden took over the Federation after the previous president, I can't remember all the details, but didn't do a good job.
Stepped down under scandalous circumstances.
Yeah. And Roden has just been fantastically successful at being elected ever since, in spite of no matter who gets put up against him. In the back scenes, Roden is a Capsuleer. He has strong connections to the Black Eagles, which these
also
were all...
another major businessman.
Yes, which is, crap, what's his name?
Who were you asking about? The Black Eagles?
Black
Mentis
Eagles
Black.
leader. Mentis Black, yeah. So Mentis Black, which actually I was reading through Source the other day, and I found out that Mentis Black was a political leader before Roden was. Like, Black and the Black Eagles was in position even prior to the disgrace of the previous president, and probably was an indirect cause of it. So the Black Eagles are effectively a CIA, but actually probably closer to like the KGB kind of in nefariousness and secrecy and all that kind of stuff. But they, a lot of people actually suggest that Mentis Black is the true power of the Gallente Federation. So while we do like to talk about how the Federation is all, freedom and democracy, it appears that they have kind of, there's definitely a political power base that has seized control in the last few years.
But to be fair, Gallente politics and Gallente current events in general have been very, very quiet. So even if there has been some sort of backroom movement, you haven't really seen anything up front just because there hasn't been anything happening in Gallente space recently.
Well, there was the Federal Marine element. Wasn't Roden touring a facility that was being set up to produce the next generation of weapons and technology for Federal Marines?
That was that, I think.
Was that part of the Nova stuff?
I think it was a subtle reference to the Nova stuff, yeah. There were in the tickers mentions of skirmishes with the Drifters periodically. Like, I think they said that the Federal Navy and the Republic Security Services have had minor engagements with the Drifters. Not recently, but, it's there.
All right, so hopping over to the other side of the battle lines, we have the Caldari State, who had a leader, and I'm not sure what happened since then. So who can catch us up on the Caldari State?
Well, so the Caldari State has been having a relatively calm time of it. Heth was driven from power after he attempted to seize some naval ships in Hatomo and lead a people's revolt against the CEP and go retake Caldari Prime. And that, of course, ended in tears and in various capital ships down as they were hunted by Capsuleers for bounties. Endgame, of course, was that Heth was captured, we assume alive, by, we assume, the Sancha. And since then, it's just sort of been business as usual for the state. Kala Kyoto has largely recovered, so far as we know, and there have been suggestions of creepy things going on in the background. There have been various terrorist strikes and that type of thing, including one on a House of Records facility. But we don't necessarily know what's been going on with that. Let's say it could be internecine fighting between various corporations, or it could just be, Garistas attacking various things for their own benefit. It's been simmering in the background, and presumably CCP is going to pick up that line before too long.
Yeah, there appears to be a bit of a power struggle among the individual factions of the Caldari State. So the Caldari State is kind of loosely held together in the fact that the corporations, the mega corporations that are involved, are not only working together as a cohesive whole as a state, but are in absolute opposition with each other inside of the state. And there has been several unfortunate accidents that have occurred between within different members of the state that appear to be perhaps almost like a Cold War that is going on, or a shadow war going on between the corporations.
If you think of the Caldari state as sort of being your prototypical cyberpunk future where you have mega corporations vying for supremacy, then you about have it. They're simultaneously unified in that they're all Caldari and that they all engage in trade and business with each other, but at the same time that they're shaking hands and making deals. They just happen to be sending teams of saboteurs against each other to conduct industrial espionage. It's just a way of life.
Indeed. It's also worth noting that it seems that the members of the state are not above working with the Guristas if they don't want to get their hands dirty. But those accusations are not 100% verified.
No, of course it can never be verified. Though in the deep backstory, Ishikone, for instance, has a lot of Guristas tie-ins, and that's where Otro Gariushi, who is the much honored, now dead CEO of Ishikone, came from.
All right, and bouncing over to probably the least loved race in the lore. There really, honestly, isn't that much to go on with it when it comes to the Minmatar, I have found. But why don't we talk about the Minmatar Republic and how they function?
I'll take a little bit of this. I know some of it just through osmosis. So the Minmatar Republic has kind of switched away from their earlier form of government, which was a republic basically set up by the Gallente in their terms of like, oh, we'll be a democracy, etc., etc., etc. The Minmatar don't actually like that idea, so they're kind of this tribal republic now where they have 7 tribal chiefs that there was an event to get them all go to Matar and have a great time, and there was an assassination attempt that didn't happen, but so right now it's kind of an oligarchy in terms of the tribal chiefs are the ones that are actually more or less in charge, and there's not really a lot of voting for that, except I guess within the tribes different ways to select their leaders. But and then the Sanmatar is when they need somebody, like one person to be in charge, it's Shakor, who recently did that ceremonial bit to go to the Amar Empire for the coronation, and they've been slowly doing their own thing.
Yeah, so while the Minmatar are thankful to the Gallente for helping them break free of the Amar, I think that the Minmatar are really focusing on their own personal identity. The Gallente Federation set up a Senate for the Minmatar, but what they've done is instead of like totally throwing out at all, they just built on top of that their tribal system. So these guys have always been very tribal. These 7 tribes have existed as long as Minmatar, or as long as the Matari people have been around, basically. But what they've done is they've made this council of elders that has absolute power. That the Senate is just basically the tribal council says this is what we're doing, and then they hand it over to the Senate to figure out the exact details about how it's going to be done, and then the Senate has to have all of their policies and everything ratified by the tribal council. So the tribal council in every way has basically ultimate authority within the Minmatar Republic. It's also worth noting that the tribal council only really exists to handle affairs that are the Minmatar as a whole. So each tribe has authority over, each tribal leader has authority over their own tribe as chieftain and leader of that tribe. And so that chieftain is their representative on the council, if that makes sense. So again, it's one of those things that we don't really know a lot of what's going on within the Minmatar Republic, but it's also extremely complicated. The other problem is that a large percentage of the Minmatar are either A, inside of the Gallente Federation as refugees, because as the Minmatar shifted more towards a tribal council, those who preferred democracy just opted to stay with the Gallente. And so there's a large, I think like a third of all the Minmatar are actually members of the Federation. And then there's still an even larger percentage of the Minmatar that are still slaves under the Amar. So, you know, and then there's also a small group of Minmatar that are basically like pirates and ne'er-do-wells that just kind of roam around not associated with their faction.
Woo, Thucker.
Yeah, that's actually a really good example of their tribal system. Although the Thuckers are technically members of the Minmatar, they have basically foregone the entire structure, and they organize into caravans. So they're effectively space gypsies.
Even with a super carrier wreck in Thera.
Ooh. All right, is there anything else that we could talk about with the Minmatar, or really any of the four nations? I know that like I said, the Minmatar are relatively friendly with the Gallente because the Gallente helped out during their rebellion against the Amar and helped create, antidotes for the Vitok, which was used by the Amar to control the Minmatar. But
and Sarum was created by Ishikone, so
by Hiro Garayushi.
Oh, that's right.
Hero in the heroic sense.
The Gallente didn't do anything.
You're right.
Yeah, that was all the broker.
That's right. My bad. So the Minmatar, I think that the Gallente feel that the Minmatar owe them something, but something that's not really talked about a lot, except for in like Eve Source and whatnot, is that the Gallente Federation are completely pricks, right? Like they are jerks to everyone that isn't Gallente. The whole reason why the Caldari state rebelled against the Gallente was because the Gallente kind of expanded out, and while the Amar enslaved everybody, the Gallente was like, hey, look, there's those Amar guys over there. We should totally team up together and, be a strong enough state, and it'll be freedom, and we'll call it the Federated Planets, except for the home state will be Gallente, and we'll have the loudest voice. And what do you mean you expanded your borders without getting permission from us? And we're going to blockade you guys and start calling the Federation just the Gallente. And then eventually the Caldari was like, screw this. So it's not like the Gallente...
Cultural victory!
Yeah. It's not like the Gallente have like this long, proud history of, treating other people great themselves. And so I think the Gallente feel that the Minmatar owe them something. I know at a certain extent that Roden feels that he has something on the Sanmatar. But the Minmatar are incredibly... or increasingly kind of annoyed by that.
Well, there was that whole instance where they actually invaded the Federation to get the Midullar's killer. So,
right.
Yeah, they're not. They're still allies in nominal terms, but I wouldn't call them friendly by any measure at this moment.
Yep. So while the state and the Amar definitely have strong ties through their business deals, the Caldari and Gallente are allies mostly because no one's tested it yet. That's what I would say.
I would assume that there hasn't been a detente because they want to preserve that friction for if or when they split for faction warfare into a four-way war.
Sure. I'm just talking about like from an in-universe perspective.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm going to tinfoil a little bit here and just kind of like peer into the future of CCP's intentions, the inclusion of Shakor in the coronation ceremony, if CCP is going to be pivoting away from Amar, which is going to be very sad because I'm not going to have anything to talk about. But CCP has done a very long Amar arc with a lot of focus on the Empire, which they've kind of culminated now. That's concluded. So they're going to be going to another Empire, and including Shakor into that coronation ceremony and into the end of that arc might be a natural pivot point for the lore team to kind of get away from the Empire and focus on the Minmatar Republic. So they might be more and more important going forward.
Oh, I can only imagine, though, how sad Delegate Zero would be to not be able to write Amar lore all the time. I mean, come on now.
I'm not saying that they're going to neglect Amar lore. I'm just saying that if I see a focus shift.
Oh, yeah, absolutely agreed.
All right.
I'm just imagining the man stroking his beard and going,
Yeah.
All right, so we're coming up on about 2 hours, and that was all of the major characters that I wanted to bring up. I'm going to open it up to talking about anything that we may have missed. People can ask questions, and we can respond to the stuff on it. We don't have a deadline. We don't have to shut down, but whatever. I also want to quickly go over the engineering complexes. So each of the engineering complexes have a very interesting name. I think, Makoto, you can probably walk us through each of the names and their meanings, correct?
Yeah, so all of these names are figures that are important to EVE Online's scientific background and the history of it. The smallest of them, the Raitaru, Raitaru was an Ishikone weapons designer that developed basically modern missile technology. And so, hey, look, it happens to be a structure that'll be great for producing components, modules, and ammunition, and of course, smaller ships. The large structure, the Asbel, is named for a Gallente prodigy that figured out one of the major issues for using quantum entanglement for FTL communications. So that's, of course, a massive part of our Neocom and our ability to instantly transfer information in EVE. Very much a big deal. And the largest and most impressive of these is actually referencing one of two names associated with the first development of a warp drive. It's the Sotio, and it's referencing the Sotio Urbata warp drive, which was developed by two Caldari engineers. And so it definitely leaves an interesting point that Urbata is still a name that hasn't been used for anything, and that's associated with warp technology. Interestingly, Sotio was also, let's say Sotio and Urbata were both mentioned in one of the very first science articles for EVE Online about FTL. And at this point, they actually used completely different terminology. For instance, referencing warp drives as we know them now as jump drives and so on.
I really, really wish they would update that.
Oh, yeah. Once they actually, Mark726 wrote an article about the old terminology and all of the various FTL tech, so something to look up.
I suspect we'll also be getting information about this in the Frigates of New Eden book that's supposed to be coming out sometime next year.
All right, so we got a question about the other pirates, pirate factions and their story. We've gone over the Sisters of Eve. We've talked a little bit about the Serpentis.
We should talk about the Blood Raiders.
We should talk about the Blood Raiders.
They're about to happen.
Go for it.
Okay. Right. So, the Amar Empire has this kind of state religion. It's kind of about devotion to God, the Amar who are in charge, etc., etc. We won't get into that. The Blood Raiders are a heretical offshoot of the Amar religion that goes back. Well, the heresy is called Sani Sebek, which means blood seed. It used to be blood friend, but that was actually a retcon to blood seed per source. And they have a pretty different understanding of the Amar faith. They do believe in a god, but it's usually called the Red God. And what they believe is that everyone can be equal and chosen, and it's about proving your worth to actually get into paradise. That the people, the very kind of Nietzschean idea, and that the strong people will lead, and sort of thing. So they believe that they show their faith and they achieve this worthiness through blood sacrifice. The Blood Raiders used to sacrifice children because that was the most pure blood, but then Capsuleers came along, and Capsuleers are cloned, so they are... So they... No, Makoto, no. So anyway...
I'm pretty sure that's a thing, right?
For those who don't know what she's referring to, it's because Makoto and I are heckling her on Discord while we're talking about this.
Yeah, Makoto asked me if Sarum had a marginally higher propensity to Sabbath theology. That is absolutely nowhere in the PF. You cannot find it anywhere, and that's just a flat-out lie.
I
Yes.
was sworn.
Just because the colors are the same doesn't mean anything.
Totally not into a theology built around strength. Despite being martial.
Anyway, and having names like Sword of the Blood for their designated successor. Anyway,
yeah, wouldn't imagine.
To be fair, that was a nice little tidbit of lore that they gave us regarding the Amarian language. That was kind of nice for them to give to us, because we would not have necessarily known which word was which, because we know that...
well, we could guess. Sanny saying, oh, no, it makes sense. Anyway, so the Blood Raiders believe that by sacrificing clones to the Red God and baking their blood, offering that up, is all... is their way of getting into paradise and so on. They're religious, but they also have a pretty big branch into science and researching biotech in general. In fact, I think the Sandy Civic, or Blood Raiders, Sandy Civic, have the longest natural lifespan. Now, people in New Eden live a long time, but a lot of that is because of enhanced cybernetics and so on and so forth. But in terms of a natural lifespan, the Blood Raiders win. So every year, generally what is going to happen is, this is becoming a yearly event now, the Crimson Harvest. So the Blood Raiders live in Delve. They have their base in Delve, and they kind of expand out from there. And they will be sending out harvest teams to go and get kill things and get blood. Now, they won't always get Capslayer blood, so even if you don't get the most pure stuff, it's okay to get, other kind of blood stuff. And last year, they pretty much ran wild over the Amar Empire for quite a bit in a couple news stories, especially in the Bleak Lands. I know there was a couple of... They tied it in with some lore attacks, some lore that players wrote their own stories with regards to attacks by the Blood Raiders, which was kind of cool. But so we'll be seeing Blood Raider sites pop up probably on Tuesday. They'll be dropping cerebral accelerators. They'll be in various places, and yeah, it'll be fun to see how they do. And unfortunately, there's really no way for us to help the Blood Raiders. For those of us that have a Blood Raider character, I don't know who you'd be, you fucking heretics. But if you do, there you go.
Yeah, Makoto mentioned something about skins. We actually, if you look on CC right now, they have a whole range of Crimson Harvest skins for all the Amar ships for this year. They
minor correction.
They have, what does this see? I think they have everything except for the actual Blood Raider hulls.
Yes.
Because those hulls are getting... The Crimson Harvest skin this year is based on the Victory skin from the Alliance tournament for this year. So people who participated in the tournament and won matches or purchased this multi-pack skin like the Sancho one from last year will be able to have it on those ships.
There's
on the rest of them, it's basically a very dark gray with kind of a dried blood red. So there's no blood spatter like there are on the regular Blood Raider skins, but it's an interesting color. I like it on the Blood Raider ships better than I like their default colors, I'll put it that way.
Oddly enough, those Blood Raider skins, yesterday they weren't even accessible. Today they are, so that's good. But
well, they won't hand them out on TQ for a while yet either. So,
well, what's dropping in the sites on Singularity are actually the Cold Iron skins. But I expect that when it goes over to Tranquility, they'll switch it to the Crimson Harvest skins.
Yeah.
Might be.
Okay.
Are they doing... Yeah, Makoto brought up, there are Blood Raider capitals, I think. Those have been talked about. I haven't really seen... There's not been any news run up to this Crimson Harvest thing. Last year, I think it was, they did this video where they had Omar Sarakusa being very naked, which was kind of interesting to see in the Carbon engine. And then there's this big blood spray, and then it kind of happened, kind of boom. Of course, last year was very busy around this time with regards to lore. You had the Secession Trials, you had the Drifter Wars, you had everything else. So we haven't seen any news whatsoever. Shadow of the Serpent event was a huge build-up in the summer based around Upwell and Serpentis. So if they're introducing Blood Raider capitals, I don't know how that's going to work, so we're going to have to wait to see exactly how that's going to work. Or what's in it.
Didn't we get some of the details that there's a Fax, a Titan, and I can't remember.
supercarrier, if I remember correctly.
Yep, but that's not lore. That's outside of our wheelhouse. So
Yeah.
All right. There's another question.
Another thing.
Oh, go.
Real quick about the Blood Raiders. The Blood Raiders are actually hostile to Serpentis, so it's not tie-in with that. There you go. Next question.
Very well. So there is a question about the Yanyung.
The Who.
Okay, so
to be fair, I say the Who specifically because there's really nothing on them outside of the Cosmos constellation.
Yeah.
We really don't know anything about the Yanjong, and it's a pity.
They were based in Deltol, and they were masters of advanced gravitronic technology and force fields. That's about it.
Yeah, it's a real pity, but they're the one race that really just doesn't have anything about them. We know tons about the Sleepers. We know tons about the Talocan now. Well, we know more about them than we used to. And there's a lot of stuff about the Takmal because the Takmal eventually became the Blood Raiders, or were kind of like an initial version of them that was around first. So they maybe not evolved into them, but they were basically a early proto version of the Sani Sebek.
Well, the Takmal were Sani Sebek, but the Takmal civilization kind of died out.
Yeah.
The Blood Raiders, the current Blood Raiders, are an offshoot of the Bleak Lands Sani, and so they're kind of descended from that. It's two different branching chains for the Sani Sebek with regards to the Takmal and the Blood Raiders.
It'd be interesting to see, or to dig into the lore and see if the Bleaklands Sabi or Sani Sabik had any ties to the Takmal, or if that was just a chain that was completely broken.
From what I understand, the Takmal left a long time ago, like right when the Amar got spaceflight, and they kind of went their own way, and then they died out. And then the Bleaklands Sani did not have any contact, from my understanding. So they're very different. And there's still Sani Sebek cults inside of the Amar Empire, right? Like the ex-Chamberlain Karsoth was a Sani Sebek, so there's still secret cults within the Amar Empire. Blood Raiders are Sani Sebek, but not every Sani Sebek is a Blood Raider. There you go.
Yeah. That's a good. It's the rectangles and squares comparison.
What happens to those Amarians? Like you just said, that there's somebody pretty important that was a Sani Sebek. So is it secretive? How did that get out? What?
Well, of course it's secretive, because if you are convicted of heresy in the Amar Empire, the default punishment is execution, right? So that's kind of the standard punishment. Now, do they always do that? No. Sometimes you can get enslaved. So it's kind of up to them. But they go for execution pretty quickly. And Sani Sebek is a heresy. Blood Raiders, to be a Blood Raider, is an especially gruesome heresy. So I mean, there's kind of this scale that goes on. Not all Sani Sebek do human sacrifice. Not all Sani Sebek drink blood. There's several different versions of the cult inside the Gallente Federation that are pretty legal in the Gallente Federation. Mendelier is a Gallente pop star who is Sani Sebek, but doesn't obviously do human sacrifices because that would be highly illegal in the Federation.
She does, I believe it's consensual blood rituals. So basically everything is, everybody, what happens between two consenting adults is perfectly legal.
Exactly. So, but if you're a Sani Sebek in the Amar Empire, you do not say you're Sani Sebek in the Amar Empire in public. It's very secretive, because if you get caught up in it, like, you're facing enslavement at a minimum. Execution is probably more likely.
All right. And so I guess, is there anything that you guys are going to go over? I'm going to actually just go down the panel and let you guys talk about whatever topic that you want. This isn't shout-outs. We'll do that afterwards. So, Alizabeth, go for it.
Empress Jamyl is still awesome. I'm very sad she's dead. Other than that, I mean,
do you want to explain a little bit about why Empress Jamyl was awesome and why she was a big key part of the story for a long time?
So Empress Jamyl was so there's actually two versions of her. There's the version that Tony G wrote that is absolutely horrible and is really unspeakable. And then there's this there's the version that you see in game and you see in the story. And in terms of she was a very driven woman, and she was very, even though she had this other in her head, she was still very able to control it, very inspiring in a way. her method of leadership was more like, follow me, I'm going to go do this. And that kind of speaks to me as a Marine Corps veteran in terms of way. She was very devoted to the Empire. In fact, she's probably the one that is responsible for the Empire being in the state where it is right now, which is actually a pretty good state. Because she actually had when they were doing the coronation of Durim II, there was actually a coup attempt to put her on the throne instead of him because everybody thought she should have been. But she refused that offer and self-destructed her pod and died to keep that from happening. So, if you look at how she behaved, she was a very devoted leader that cared very much about her people and her empire, and just a very compelling character. And it's very sad she's dead, but we can move on and see how the lore goes from there.
Yep, I'm going to actually show the coronation of Empress Jamyl because I think it was also a really good showcase to kind of the Amar mentality. So let me play that real quick.
On a momentous day that shall be honored for time everlasting, our glorious empire at last heralded the coronation of Her Majesty Empress Jamyl. As billions of faithful beheld a scene of unprecedented imperial might, she arrived with her guardians to announce the dawn of a new reclaiming. The legacy of her reign began with a decree to every soul of New Eden.
I am the harbinger of hope. I am the sword of the righteous. And to all who hear my words, I say this. What you give to this empire, I shall give back unto you.
So yeah, Jamyl Sarum is definitely gone, or is gone, but definitely not forgotten. But we're going to move on. Makoto, what is your topic?
So I've got actually a few things. Quickly, some administrative stuff. So I had stepped back a bit over the summer and last spring due to a lot of stuff going on. And actually, a terrible decision, had deleted my Twitter account. I mean, that's sacrilege, right? So if anyone's curious, follow me at Makoto Priano on Twitter, and we'll get that ball rolling. Of course, as always, do have to push the consortium, Arataka Research Consortium. If you're interested in Drifter stuff, check us out in-game. The channel is Consortium Operations. That said, the main topic that I want to hit on is actually the design decision around pirate capitals. So as we know, they are very expensive to produce, to the point that the pirate dreadnought is more expensive to produce even than a supercarrier. And I understand the decision from a balance perspective. You don't necessarily want, for instance, the Vehement to just flat out replace the Moros. But the flip side is that it didn't allow the market to determine the balance point between value and power. And I think CCP may have done themselves a disservice by putting that price so high and putting it outside of common usage. In the last month, only 2 pilots have ended up using a Vehement on the field. And it'd be really nice to actually see shiny, powerful ships like that a little bit more often.
It is worth noting that, again, not to be an apologist, but from a design perspective, it's very easy to bring down the price. But it would be almost impossible to, if it was overly prolific, it'd be very difficult to stop that. So
Quite so.
It's actually, it reminds me of the multi-hackers that they introduced, because those were also basically so expensive that nobody used it, but that allowed it to be in the game and kind of its power level to be assessed before they were able to lower the price to make it available.
Quite reasonably. It's just a thing that remains relevant, I think, because they are introducing Blood Raider capitals with this event, and then we'll end up seeing a new line of Garistas, Angel, and Sancha capitals when their respective events roll around. Which, of course, does bring me up to wrapping up my little final thoughts, which is say that with the upcoming Drifter NPE, with Alpha Clones, there's a lot of stuff coming as CCP as sort of accelerates out of their summer lull. So I think the game is afoot, and we've got interesting times ahead of us.
Thank you very much, Makoto. Let's move on to Mark.
I don't have a ton to say. I'm hoping to get a new updated version of the lore guide through Catiz's coronation up before I leave for Vegas is my current hope. So keep an eye out on my Twitter for that. Other than that, I am going to pick up my lobbying for the lore team to do anything with the Yan Jung.
All right, and thank you for pretending to have difficulty in pronouncing her name to make me feel less bad. Morwen.
I do what I can.
Morwen, you've got the ball.
It's funny. For once, I don't actually have a lot of stuff to talk about. Because I've been just so busy with prep for the Alliance tournament and dealing with stuff like that, and then doing all the Drifter stuff on the side. So it's kind of like, I think we've really covered everything that's worth covering for now. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing where CCP goes with things. I have my reservations about what they're looking to do with the new player experience, based on what has been leaked so far. But I mean, time will tell. Kind of just keeping my eyes and ears open and winging it as the best I can.
All right, and some administration. Obviously, like many of you might have noticed, Hydrostatic Podcast hasn't really been making any shows recently, which is because 2 out of the 3 cast members, Lockfox is very focused on his Prosper stuff, which is very good if you're interested in market information, and Fyridian has largely been away from the game, although he does still help out, or he does still own the Tweet Fleet Slack now. So that's why you haven't really seen very many Hydrostatic podcasts, but we do still want to bring you all of your lore information to your fingertips, so make sure to pay attention for lore updates, and hopefully this will be the beginning of a new set of lore panels. We'll have to see how things go, whether or not the story develops fast enough for us to have things to talk about, so on and so forth. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you follow myself and all of the other members here on Twitter, as they are not only very good at giving out information about the lore, but also kind of represent the bleeding edge of knowledge of Eve, kind of what's coming out in Eve in general. So yeah, that's kind of what it's all about. So that's all I have for... Oh, nope, that's about it for administrative stuff. So let's go ahead and go quickly down the line and do shout-outs. Elizabeth?
I'll shout out to my Drifter Killing Group, Seraph, and once again to Empress Jamyl, still up there in paradise. Awesome.
Dead as a can of spam. Makoto?
Shout out to Ark, naturally. Shenanigans, the lot that we get up to, it's brilliant. And also, I will evidently be going to Eve Vegas, so come harass me there.
Shout out to whoever got you a ticket. Mark?
Shout out to, as usual, the CCP lore team. I love you guys, and I'm looking forward to seeing whoever wants to see me in Eve Vegas.
And Morwen?
Honestly, kind of just a general shout out to my court mates who put up with all the bullshit that we've had to deal with over the summer. Alliance tournaments are stressful. So is everything else. And just to everybody who unfortunately missed this, because we didn't really advertise this panel as best as we normally do. I apologize. That's partly my fault as well, because I should have been tweeting as much as Ash was.
It's all right. And my shout out is, of course, to Aderon Robotics, my corporation. They have been an amazing group of guys. They are the premier corporation for Gallente alpha clones to seek content in New Eden. We've been really retooling ourselves to make ourselves ready for the obvious resurgence that's going to come from faction warfare in the post-Ascension age, and I have a lot of hope about what that's going to end up looking like. So if you're interested, go ahead and join us and fight the good fight against the squids. If you want to fight the drifters, I strongly recommend you join ARC Consortium, which I understand I just use an abbreviation and then use the last word of the abbreviation, but I guess, get used to it. And either way, the key to this is find what you love in Eve. If you find Eve boring, if you find what you're doing boring, if you find yourself being cynical about your leadership or about Fozzie or about whatever, realize that it may just be that you're doing the wrong thing. There's a intensely complex universe. There are thousands of people, all with their own dreams and ambitions and different things to do and see and experience. And all of the guys that you have heard from today are good examples of people who have basically poured endless amounts of hours into discovering the true beauty that is this silly internet spaceship game that we all play. So on that note, on behalf of our panel and myself, I would like to thank all of our viewers, both live and our recording. Thank you for watching this lore panel, Hydrostatic Presents Lore Panel, and we will see you in space.